How the Fed let the world blow up in 2008. High oil prices blinded the Fed to the growing danger before the crash. Now, the Fed actually did a good job in the first part of the crisis. It aggressively cut interest rates from 5.25% in September 2007 to 2% in April 2008. But then the Fed was blinded. It had been all summer. That's when high oil prices started distracting it from the slow-burning financial crisis. They kept distracting it in September, even though oil had fallen far below its July highs. And they were the reason that the Fed decided to do nothing on September 16. It kept interest rates at 2% and intoned that the downside risks to growth and the upside risks to inflation are both significant concerns. In other words, the Fed was just as worried about an inflation scare that was already passing as it was about a once-in-three-generations crisis. It brought to mind what economist R.G. Hawtrey had said about the Great Depression. Back then, central bankers had worried more about the possibility of inflation than the grim reality of deflation. With that in mind, here's a look at what the Fed could have and didn't do to make the Great Recession a little less so. The oil shock. Graded on a curve, the Fed did okay. At least it didn't raise rates that summer like the ECB did. But on an absolute scale, the Fed could have done better. It could have done in 2008 what it did in 2011 when another oil spike came along. Say that the increase in inflation was transitory and they were focused on long-term inflation expectations instead. Now, more dovish language that summer wouldn't have saved the world. But it would have kept money a little looser. And that could have given the financial system a little more breathing room to keep raising capital, like the Fed had been doing before. Interestingly, during the Fed rate hikes of 1983-84 and 1994-95, oil prices were either falling or relatively stable, which may explain why the economy avoided recession. Similar to Fed rate hikes, a doubling of oil alone does not cause a recession. For example, in the period 2010 to 2014 and again 2016 to 2018, oil prices rose 2 to 3 times, yet a recession did not occur. It becomes clear that a recession only occurs when the Fed funds rate rose by at least 2% to 2.5% and the price of crude oil doubled or more. When only one of the variables is rising sharply, a false alarm is triggered. For example, there was no recession during the Fed funds hikes of 1983-84 and 1994-95 because the price of oil was falling or stable. From 2010 to 2014, the price of oil more than doubled, but the Fed wasn't raising rates, so there was no recession. The important takeaway and economic rationale for this logic are that when the price of money and the price of energy are rising sharply, it causes a retrenchment in consumer and commercial behavior that leads to a recession. Based on the data of the past 5 decades, Fed rate hikes alone do not cause recessions. A better record of predicting recessions is achieved when the Fed has hiked rates by 2% to 2.5% and oil prices have at least doubled. The price of money and energy are major financial inputs to financial planning, so when they simultaneously rise sharply, consumers and businesses are forced to retrench.